you for attending the Urban League of Portland's Candidate Forum for Attorney General. My name is Lakiana Drury. I am the founder and executive director of Word is Bond and also a commissioner and vice chair of the Oregon Commission on Black Affairs. I'll be tonight's moderator. Before we get started, I want to thank our community partners for supporting tonight's forum. Tonight will feature one of the candidates running for Attorney General. We are joined by State Representative Dan Rayfield, who is the Democratic nominee for this position. Please note that both of the Republican and Democrat candidates were invited, but because of scheduling conflicts, Will Lathrop, the Republican nominee, will not be here. For tonight's forum, we will begin with opening statements. We'll go through several questions. We'll take a short intermission to allow folks to use the bathroom and take a break, followed by several more questions, and then we will conclude with opening statements. We hope that this forum is exciting. We hope that it is informative, and we hope that we do pose some challenging questions to our candidate, but we also want to make sure that this is a respectful space where everybody can be heard. Because of that, we have several rules, which I will now read off. Number one, please remain muted if you are not answering a question. Our candidates will have 3 minutes for their opening statements. During the question section, each candidate will be afforded 4 minutes. After the questions are complete, they'll have 3 minutes to then deliver your closing statement. I ask that you please be courteous and conscious of time, and just follow my instructions at all time. A note about tonight's content: this forum and questions will be covering sexual and domestic violence. So if those are topics that are sensitive to you, please be aware of that. We know that there are a number of challenges facing Oregonians across the state, and this is a debate of a lot of those topics. With that being said, we are going to get started with opening statements. And Mr. Rayfield, Representative Rayfield, we will have you start. If you can please give us 3 minutes of introducing yourself and really speak to why you are running for Attorney General.
Yeah, well, and Lucky, thank you for having me and be a part of this conversation. My name, as stated, is Dan Rayfield. I'm the Democratic candidate for Attorney General. I have often thought that we can solve our community's challenges, our state's challenges better together as a community. And I've really tried to do that in the legislature, in my personal life. And a lot of that comes from my personal background and how I was raised with my parents. It was a very diverse set of parents. My dad was actually a Republican, senior vice president of a commercial insurance company. He was a colonel in the Air Force Reserves, conservative Republican. The first political event I went to was a Dan Quayle fundraiser for Vice President Dan Quayle a long time ago. My mother, on the end of it, was incredibly progressive and would take me to protests as a kid. Protested the Iran-Contra scandal. She would actually go to the Nevada nuclear test sites and get arrested protesting nuclear weapons, and really kind of introduced me to what civil disobedience means in our world and the impact that that can have. And when I asked my mom, I was like, why did you get arrested? Why are you doing this? She would say, it's like, I really believe that having less nuclear weapons in the world is how we make our world safe. And then I would talk to my dad and ask him the exact same question. Why do you want to have nuclear weapons? The exact opposite. And he would say, well, I believe we need to have nuclear weapons to keep our world safe. And it was kind of an interesting intersection of my life where you realize there's two people that you deeply care about that are going about a complex problem in vastly different ways, trying to get to that same endpoint. And I've tried to take that leadership style into the legislature in the roles that I've had there, building a culture of respect while still trying to stay true to your values while moving things forward, whether that was fully funding education, whether that was making sure that we expanding healthcare for all Oregonians. And I want to take that same leadership style into the Department of Justice, where we really build on the work that we've done in the legislature. One, helping to keep communities safe. It's an important role in that Department of Justice. Number two, I really believe we need to expand the work we do to protect seniors and consumers, whether it's fly-by-night lending or fly-by-night scams that come in and out of our communities, predatory lending, and other things. I think we can expand that work and really be the Attorney General for all Oregonians. And then finally, I really believe that the Attorney General should match the values of the people that they represent. And that means you're protecting Oregon's values from national attacks, whether that is on abortion rights, which could happen, especially with the threat of a national abortion ban, or whether that is our environmental rights, which are being under attack right now in the United States from national attacks. Those are kind of the three areas that I'm very excited to get to work on in this Attorney General role.
Thank you so much, Representative Rayfield. We are now going to move into our first question of the evening. One of the things you just mentioned was helping keep communities safe, and this question is very pertinent to that. Since the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission's annual bias reports have been published, Black Oregonians have been the most frequent population of bias crime targets. Last year alone, only 36% of prosecuted bias crimes returned a conviction. How will you use the Attorney General's office to increase investigations, prosecutions, reporting, and education of bias crimes? You have 4 minutes to answer that question.
Thank you, Lakiana. Those numbers are obviously very concerning just for any Oregonian in that space. I really believe that partnership at all levels of government is going to be required to move the needle if we're focusing on outcomes when it comes to bias crimes. I think for folks watching, I always like to remind people the different levels of enforcement that go on. There's the one-on-one contact in our communities, right? And obviously there's a lot of lack of trust at times with law enforcement in communities, but that is one of the first levels that you start seeing that interaction. Then you have the district attorneys in your counties that are really the front lines of prosecution. At the Department of Justice, one of the things that we have there is a civil rights unit. It's not a division, but it's considered a unit. And within that unit, there is a bias response hotline. And this is intended to be a trauma-informed hotline. We actually funded this when I was co-chair of Ways and Means. It's a non-criminal line, right? So if people don't want to report things, they can safely contact and kind of have a trauma-informed space where they can report these issues. One of the things that and it is a referral resource as well in that same space for victims, witnesses, and in that same space of that bias response line. So as I step into this role, one of the things that I'm very interested in doing is reviewing the Civil Rights Unit for having conversation with community to talk about its effectiveness towards moving towards these outcomes. I have, in some of the conversations that I've had, I don't believe that it is sufficient the way it is currently operating. I think there's some people with some wonderful ideas to actually start advancing this and moving it forward in a little bit of a different look. But I think what I'm very interested in doing in this role, walking in, is doing an assessment, bringing people together to then decide what are the next best steps moving forward. Because right now, it's more of a response line rather than, as the question asked about, investigations, prosecutions, and reporting, right? And it's more on this education and referral source. But that is the entity within the Department of Justice that I think really has a wonderful vision. I'm not sure if we're accomplishing that vision given the resources allocated to it.
Thank you, Representative, for that answer. This next question, I'm just going to give a warning, it is a sensitive topic. A recent Oregonian investigation found that Oregon still has a backlog of hundreds of sexual assault cases. Even more troubling, the average processing time for sexual assault kits was almost 10 times longer than the state allows for. How will you use the Office of the Attorney General to ensure sexual assault kits are processed efficiently and quickly? You have 4 minutes, Representative Rayfield, to answer this question.
And obviously those outcomes are unacceptable in terms of having a safe space and being an advocate for victims and making sure that there's accountability within the system. And so as we look at this, I think it might be helpful for some to look at a little of the history for those that haven't read the articles. I think there's some really good articles that have really unpacked this. When I first got into the legislature, and I came to the legislature in 2014, within a period of time, I became aware that we already had a backlog. And for those that are not tracking, the Oregon State Police is where those, that's where the testing gets done within those kits. What we ended up doing was applying resources to then get the backlog back to acceptable timeframes moving in this space. And that was very successful. What I find that is interesting in this period of time, and I served in the legislature, we would talk about budgets for the Oregon State Police, and there was a bunch of co-occurrence, apparently, according to some of the news articles, about what has gone on in terms of staffing and other issues that caused a new backup and buildup of this issue. And so we are now effectively climbing the mountain again to get rid of that backlog. I'm very interested in this role to keep the pressure on the Oregon State Police, make sure that they have the adequate resources that they need to be able to accomplish this goal. And I do believe going forward, we should really focus on not getting back into this position again and really making sure that we're having good reporting, whether that is to the Department of Justice or probably more appropriately making sure that it is being reported in both places, Department of Justice as well as the legislature in the budget committees as this is going on. I think this is a very important topic.
Thank you for that answer, Representative Rayfield. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into that and talk about sexual assaults in regards to Black women. Black women in Oregon are more than twice as likely as white women to be the victim of sexual assaults. They experience domestic violence at a rate 35% higher than white women and are twice as likely to be killed by an intimate partner. Every hour, 13 Oregonians call the domestic violence hotline. How will you use the Crime Victim and Survivor Services Division to ensure a safer community for survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence? It's 4 minutes you have to answer this question.
So what I want to do is take a look at what we do now and then talk a little bit about what we should, I think, be taking a second look in terms of moving forward. What goes on right now is in this division, it is supports and services that come into the Department of Justice. Oftentimes it is pass-through money. And what I mean by pass-through is that the legislature allocates money to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice then allocates that out into the community to hopefully accomplish and get better outcomes. A good example would be in the domestic violence space where we're thinking about housing. That's an incredibly important area. For those who have been in the space, housing is an incredible area for people trying to leave a situation of domestic violence where they don't know where they're going to go. And so this is an incredibly important area. The couple things that I think we need to do walking into this next legislative session, I think we need to be looking at the adequacy of the funds that the legislature is appropriating given the size. Now that is coming from the legislature to the Department of Justice. The next thing that I think that needs to happen, I would like to take a look back at how the money has been allocated from the Department of Justice. So that would be within the purview of the Department of Justice, out into the community, and making sure that it's proportionate to some of the outcomes that we want to curb and are going to the right community organizations to get the efficacy that we're looking for. Finally, I think it is important in all of these conversations to engage the community and frankly, the entire state of Oregon with all the different providers to really sit there and say, is this enough? What else should we be doing? What is working well and what isn't working well? And have that ongoing conversation moving forward in this space. And so that's, I think, kind of how I really see, walking up, and if you were to say the first year moving in this space.
Thank you, Representative Rayfield. We are now at our commercial break, and I'll be reading a little bit about the various organizations that are involved in tonight's forum and invite people to take a deep breath, grab some water, and just relax for a little bit. So I want to introduce the Urban League of Portland, which is hosting tonight's debate, led under the leadership of the CEO and President Nikenge Harmon Johnson. The Urban League of Portland is one of the oldest Black-serving nonprofit organizations in Oregon. The mission is to empower African Americans and others to achieve equality in education, employment, health, economic security, and quality of life in areas that are deeply affect the social and economic conditions of Black families in our communities. It is important that our voices are heard and that they matter to decision makers like yourself. The Urban League's programs are their values in action. They help the community activate civic empowerment, navigate through complicated systems, and support healthy outcomes for the communities they serve. For example, tomorrow night, October 3rd at 5 p.m., for the first time, the Urban League will host their Equal Opportunity Day Awards Dinner at the Portland Art Museum. They will honor Black and other literary and visual artists. We will hear from President and CEO Nkenge Harmon Johnson as she reflects on the substantial growth of services the Urban League provides. Proceeds from the dinner will fund vital Urban League programs in our community. You can join their movement for justice and equity in Oregon by visiting their website at ulpdx.org. If you're able, I invite you to donate and or become a member, as your support is an investment in our Black community and the robust programming that empowers communities and changes lives. And not just reading from the script here, that is really the case. The Urban League is doing a fantastic job across the city and across the state, really, to empower Black communities and bridge the gap between a lot of different stakeholders. The other organization that we'd like to highlight is Word is Bond, which I am the founder and executive director of. Word is Bond is a leadership incubator for young Black men. I founded it in 2017 when I was still a high school social studies teacher at Rosemary Anderson High School in North Portland. The original mission of Word is Bond is to bring together young Black men in law enforcement for the very challenging conversations that are impacting our community on a day-to-day basis. And since 2017, we've grown the organization to be a holistic incubator for young Black men, where we provide year-round leadership experiences for young men, including paid summer internships in the summertime, a one-week program called the Spring Leadership Forum to Washington, D.C., where our youth leaders meet with members of Oregon legislature on Capitol Hill and craft public policy to help shape the issues that are happening here in Portland, while also visiting historically Black colleges in the DC metro area. And one of my programs I'm most proud about is our newest program, the Black Star Homecoming Expedition, which for the last 2 years has sent young Black men from Portland back to Ghana in West Africa for a 2-week leadership expedition. You can find out more about our nonprofit on our website, mywordisbond.org. And we also encourage you to donate and support those programs to empower young Black men across the city. And I personally want to thank President Johnson for supporting our work and the collaborations that we've had over the years. The last thing I want to plug for tonight's forum is that this is the second part in a series of Urban League forums that will be hosted between now and October 18th. This is an opportunity for viewers to make sure that they are ready to vote in November. We do have a brand new electoral system here in Portland, an expanded city government, and a mayor's race. So this is, in addition to the presidential election, this is an extremely important race. It's still time to register to vote. The deadline is October 15th. You can update your voter registration, or you can get signed up to get accurate information by going to OregonVotes.gov. I do work with a ton of youth, so I would be remiss if I didn't give a plug to them as well to make sure that they vote. And even if you are under the age of 18, I believe at 16 you can register to vote, so that when you do turn 18, you will be able to receive your first ballot. With that being said, we are going to put Mr. Representative Rayfield back in the hot seat and go back to some questions. We are going to dive into question number 4, which is about data breaches. Recent data breaches have demonstrated, that the need for robust safeguards over personal data. Black communities are more likely to have accounts hacked and identities stolen, and are 53% more likely to suffer financial impacts following these breaches. As Attorney General, how will you use the Oregon Consumer Protection Act and other laws to protect Oregon consumers? Representative, you're on mute. There we go.
That's gracious. You think after all these years we'd figure that out. This is a great question. A lot of people, when they think about the Attorney General's office, they often think this is a law enforcement, role, and it is important to keep communities safe, and that's about 10% respectively of the job and the budget in that space. A really significant responsibility with the Attorney General's office is in this space to protect all Oregonians in this consumer protection area. And I would say, Lakiani, that when you even think about data breaches, there's other things that have incredible disproportionate impacts, not just only in communities of color, but also a lot of other vulnerable Oregonians, whether they be seniors, from predatory lending. You think about there's for-profit colleges that have lured people into taking out student loan debt when there's no actual real career path on the back end. You have, like I said, fly-by-night scams that come in and out of communities. I really believe it is the Attorney General's responsibility to look out on behalf of all of these folks and be an Attorney General for all Oregonians in this context. And that's really what I want to do, is expand the work within our civil enforcement division to actually go after this behavior. And when you are enforcing the laws, that acts as a deterrent for these things to continue into the future. And so that is one of the areas that I'm very interested in doing. One of the things that, I talked a little bit about is that civil rights unit and how can we expand that. I'm very interested in creating a working families unit that will really tackle wage theft. And we know how that impacts folks. Talk about misclassification of workers, child labor violations. There are ways that I think we can have a broader impact with a different set of tools at the Attorney General's office that will ripple out into communities across Oregon. And so that's what I'm interested in, really making sure that we have a heightened focus in that civil enforcement division, whether it be data breach or all the way into wage theft.
Thank you for that answer, Representative Rayfield. This is question number 5, which is actually our final question of the evening. Before we get to closing statements, the Oregon Department of Justice chairs the Commission on Statewide Law Enforcement Standards of Conduct and Discipline, which trains law enforcement officers and prosecutors across the state. How will you use the office to advance accountability, transparency, equity, and trust in Oregon law enforcement?
Yeah, and the first thing I would say is, like, I share the values, when we talk about transparency. How do you build trust within law enforcement? There's accountability. All of those things I think are shared values that we all have as you walk into this space. In terms of the actual commission itself, what I want to do is take a step back and talk a little bit for folks. This is going to be, a lot of people may not know what this commission is or how it got set up. The commission was based upon a law in 2001 that was passed. The first meeting it had, and again, these are the objectives, those shared values, really moving towards those shared values with this commission in a partnership of bringing people around a table. The first meeting of that commission was in 2022, so about a year after it passed, give or take. And it has been meeting since there. The first thing that I would like to do in this role is sit down with the people that have been involved with this commission and really get a debrief and have a conversation about how is it going, and what are the outcomes that you've been seeing. Is it, what could make this better? What's going well? And really start there. The approach that I took in the legislature and the approach that I want to take in moving forward in this spot is really looking at being accessible, being someone that elevates voices in the space, and then also not meeting just to meet. We should really have a vision and outcome-based conversation with a commission like this. And these are the things that I'm very interested in kind of moving forward, learning more about in the approach that we move forward in this space. And so that's where I see this conversation going in this, because I think at the end of this, I think everybody is participating with the idea of how do we advance those shared objectives. And I'm just not sure in the short time that it's been around, I think it's the appropriate time to take stock of how effective it has been, in terms of the outcomes.
Thank you so much, Representative Rayfield, for that answer. And since we are a little bit ahead of time, and you were on the topic of trust, I want to ask you a follow-up question. Mm-hmm. African Americans in the state and across the country do not often feel that that elected officials represent them, right? Or really understand where they're coming from. I work with youth, I work with adults, and they don't feel that trust in that the elected officials will actually work for them. So knowing that, and knowing that a lot of folks may not even want to vote just based on that, what could you say to individuals listening that feel a lack of trust in the system, that you, if you were elected, will go to work on their behalf as Secretary of State?
Yeah, and what I would say, and I want to talk a little bit about the legislature. I think the one thing that we don't realize, and I never realized this growing up, and I felt the same way. Sometimes I feel that way right now when I look at the federal government. But I think there is the one thing in our state government, whether it's even to our municipal government, it's incredibly accessible. But we don't know that and see it, touch it, see it, and feel it. We have very good people in these positions. So as a state representative, one of the values that I always had was accessibility. And I viewed my role in this space as a facilitator. I cannot know everything. It would be absurd to think that I could know everything and perfectly empathize under all situations. And so we took this approach in our office where we really facilitated. One of the best examples that I can give you is we had a young woman that was a high school student, and she met with me, and we just had coffee in the community. And we sat down, and Lakiana, I will tell you, it was one of the best PowerPoints I have ever seen on an idea about how to address organ donations. And the reason she wanted to address organ donations, she had a personal family connection to this. And I will tell you, she had a better presentation than most legislators when they go in front of a committee. And this is just in a coffee shop in Corvallis. And we worked with her for 4 years. This was not my idea. This was not like Dan's brilliant idea. This was her idea. And we passed that bill ultimately into really move education and actually get better outcomes in the organ donation space. I really want people in our communities to know that even as Attorney General, my goals about accessibility and getting to meet people and advocating on their behalf are not going to change. And of course, everybody has time constraints and there's only so many hours in a day, and I've got my own family. And so you're trying to balance all those things, but that is the tone and temperament that I want to take in this office. But I also, more importantly, is people are thinking about these ideas, right? And you're in a high school or you're in college, or shoot, you're 80 years old and you're retired. There are people that want to listen to you and want to take your ideas and make the world a better place. That's why people do this work. And so I would encourage people to not feel like you can't write an email and ask for a meeting, a one-on-one meeting, or don't feel like you can't pick up the phone, because you absolutely can. Oregon is the size of a state. We still can have that personal touch. And I work with a lot of people who in the legislature, outside the legislature, who just deeply care about this state and in their community.
Thank you so much for that answer, Representative Rayfield, especially considering we did say we weren't going to ask any unscripted questions, but just because of the time we had it. And just want to also note that was for Attorney General, not Secretary of State. Following that, we're going to go into our closing statements. So Representative Rayfield, you have 3 minutes to give any final thoughts and statements as to your position for Attorney General for the state of Oregon. Go ahead.
I love that question, by the way. I'd answer that any day of the week. So I think we just need more people to want to get involved and feel comfortable with it. So I think that's wonderful in terms of the engagement. So what I'd love to do is just talk about kind of 3 things about that I want to bring to this office. One is a personal lens, and I talked a little bit early on about how I really believe that we can solve greater challenges in our communities together, and we do it better together. And I firmly believe that comes from my parents. We did that in the legislature, and I want to continue that work moving forward. The other lens that I really want to take into this role is one where I didn't take a straight, narrow path in life to get where I am today. I didn't graduate high school on time. I saw abuse and addiction up front personally. I was arrested about 4 times by the time I was 20 years old. I didn't graduate college the first time I went through. And I'm a firm believer that your worst moments in life don't have to define who you can become in this world. And that's one of the lessons, that's one of the roles and the lenses that I really want to bring into this work, especially as we think about how do you make our communities safe. There's really important work to curb drug cartels, human trafficking, drug delivery, internet crimes against children, but doing it with that lens, doing the work of protecting seniors and consumers, right? Expanding that role, incredibly important. And then finally, protecting Oregon's values from abortion rights all the way to our environmental laws. What I bring into this is 18 years as an attorney working on behalf of individuals, whether it was against large corporations or civil rights 1983 claims of denial of medical treatment and everything in between. I also bring my experience as a legislator for 10 years with a reputation of building a culture of respect, bringing people together, and advocating on all four corners of this state. At the same time, when I served as Speaker of the House, you're also managing a budget of more than $400 billion and also 400 employees. And it's an incredible set of experiences to also be able to move into this position. I would absolutely be honored to have everybody who's watching the support in this position. And more importantly, the reason I am here is a part of what I hope to be a long-term continuing conversation about how we can have the best Attorney General's office in the nation representing everyone.
Thank you so much for that answer, Representative Rayfield, and for being here tonight and for answering the various questions that we had. This does conclude our candidate forum for Attorney General for the state of Oregon. I want to thank LNS Captioning and Open Signal who are airing this forum. We want to thank Representative Rayfield again for participating tonight and for our community partners. I also want to again highlight the importance of voting. It cannot be overstated. The deadline to register to vote for this election is October 15th. Election day is November 5th. The ballots will be coming out soon. Democracy only works when people vote. So get registered, make informed decisions, educate yourself, listen to the other forums, and make the best decisions that you feel are possible. At the Urban League of Portland, much of our work is done with our local partners who have our deep commitment to our shared values. And we would like to thank the following partners: Reimagine Oregon, the NAACP of Portland, Fair Housing Council, local union SCIU 49, Welcome Home, the Coalition of Black Men, Kairos PDX, Muslim Education Trust, the Women's Foundation, the YWCA, Impact Northwest, Children's Institute, NEA, Latino Network, Northwest Pilot Project, and Self-Enhancement, Inc. In closing, please remember that the Urban League is a nonprofit and relies on donations and membership to serve the community. It is through your generosity that the Urban League of Portland can host forums and other educational events like this. I'm strongly encouraging you to donate and support them. And again, tonight's event was part of the Urban League series of virtual candidate forums for the general election. Please visit ulpdx.org to learn more about the series of events. If you need assistance in voting or registering to vote during the election season, staff at the Urban League are standing by to talk with you. You can reach out via their website, social media, or call 503-280-2620. That is 503-280-2600 for assistance. On behalf of the Urban League President, Nikenge Harmon Johnson, on behalf of the Board of Directors and all of our members, I want to thank our audience for being with us tonight. Again, my name is Lakiani Tomajuri. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Word is Bond, as well as the Vice Chair on the Oregon Commission on Black Affairs. Have a great evening, everybody. Good luck to Representative Rayfield and the rest of our candidates in the election, and we will see you all soon. Thank you.